Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning Five here on Friday, January 6th, 2023. I am Dave Biddle. I'm very happy to be joined by Jonah Booker for his usual Friday visit. All right, JBook, a lot to get into. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do want to get into the absolute nonsense about Marvin Harrison Jr. and TreVeyon Henderson. At least I think it's BS. What are you hearing? There's a lot of, there's some smoke out there. They could be thinking about transferring to USC. I think it's complete nonsense. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I agree, Dave. I don't think you're going to get either one of those guys transferring. It makes zero sense for Marvin Harrison Jr. to transfer to USC right now. I mean, you look at him, he's going to be a first round pick next year, the first wide receiver off the board. He was already a Bolitnikoff winner. Uh, he's being developed by one of the best wide receiver coaches in the game. When it comes to NIL, we all saw what Jackson Smith and Jigba made in Columbus. I know people like to knock on Ohio State's NIL front, but you look at CJ Stroud made over $2 million. Jackson Smith and Jigba made 1.7 million as the wide receiver one in Columbus. So you're going to think that a national name like Marvin Harrison Jr. will have plenty of opportunities to make some type of cash in Columbus. On top of that, Dave, you look at the Ohio State roster coming back next year. His high school quarterback potentially could win the job and be thrown to him, a guy that he works with all off season, who's his throwing partner. You have the Ohio State roster, which is going to be absolutely loaded when it comes to the skill position. If Cade Stover decides to come back, you're going to have 100% of the skill position returning besides your quarterback. So they're going to make another national championship run. So I'm not worried about Marvin Harrison Jr. transferring. I don't believe TreVeyon Henderson is going to transfer. I do believe USC, they are in the process of tampering with certain guys on the roster. What could it be? What everybody's speculating about is a Mecca, because if you look at the relationship that he has with Lincoln Riley, because it came down to Ohio State and Oklahoma during his recruitment, it was a nail biter. So Emeka has already said, Dave, during the Peach Bowl interviews, and you can attest that he's been tampered with. Schools have reached out to him. So to me, a lot of people have been speculating that it's Marvin. I wouldn't be surprised that USC was tampering with Emeka Ibuka. If you look at the existing relationship, and the kid has already said schools have already reached out to him. So it's not just a situation to where people are speculating if a school reached out. He has already confirmed that schools and programs have reached out to him to see if he would be interested.
I'll just say this, and I was going to say this anyway. We had a commenter that kind of is on my train of thought here, Buckeye 80 on YouTube. Um, yeah, saying I think all teams are calling other kids at other schools. I mean, frankly, if Ohio State's not doing this behind the
Yeah.
scenes, they're not doing their job, and I bet they are. I mean, that's how this works with the portal now. Obviously, we don't like it if Lincoln Riley is trying to get a Mecca Ibuka or Marvin Harrison Jr. or TreVeyon Henderson or all three, but you could argue, in fact, you would if you're a USC fan, that he wouldn't be doing his job if he was not doing that. It's
Yeah.
a compliment to those kids. Like, these kids are fantastic. Any coach in the country would love to have Marvin Harrison Jr. He was the best wide receiver in the country this past season, and I know he didn't win the Bolitnikoff. Emeka Egbuka's fantastic. TreVeyon Henderson was playing through a broken foot. I think he's going to have a big year. So yeah, I don't think these guys would be doing their jobs if they weren't tampering.
Yeah,
You know what I
and
mean?
I will say this: I had people last night asking me on Twitter, like, uh, how come Ohio State coaches and other coaches aren't calling these, programs out? And I will say it's probably a unwritten rule amongst the coaches that says, hey, if the NCAA is not going to regulate this, the NCAA is not going to come down. Only thing the NCAA is concerned about right now is going after Michigan. So the rest of us who are off in left field doing whatever we want to do, we're just going to go ahead and do it behind the scenes, and we're not going to tell on anybody and point the finger. So that's why you really haven't seen any of the coaches in the entire college football industry really come out and name a school and say, hey, I have definitive proof that this program, that program have been tampering with my players. You've seen the Pitt coach and Mac Brown saying, yes, schools are reaching out, but they stopped short of actually naming an actual coach in the program who's been doing it.
Oh, we're gonna get to Jim Harbaugh and the NCAA and all that to finish the show. Just a little tease there. We're gonna get into all that. I put on, kind of a sarcastic, kind of serious tweet right before we came on the show, giving Jim Harbaugh a little advice. I'm here for Jim. You know me, I'm here for Jim. All right. It's going to be the story of the offseason. Let's just cut right to the chase. Is Kyle McCord, and I'm going to preface it with this. I know there's no way Ryan Day is going to announce a starter in spring or leaving spring. I mean, he didn't even announce Justin Fields was the starter like over Chugs until like 2 weeks before the opener or something like that, even though we all knew it back in 2019. So I don't think he's going to name a starter until camp and probably a little bit deep into camp. But are you convinced it's going to be Kyle McCord, or do you think Devin Brown has a shot at this job, or might Devin Brown win it? Where are you at, JBook?
I'm not convinced. I think that Kyle McCord actually has a legitimate shot of winning the actual quarterback battle. Will he do it? That's to be determined. I do know that Devin Brown has all the talent in the world to win this position. I think he's going to get every opportunity. I can actually see it, Dave, and I know a lot of people are going to hate it. I can see a
Ooh, there's two
situation in
points.
order. Yeah, I was going to say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say we saw what Michigan was able to do with K. McNamara and JJ McCarthy. Like I think you could see a situation where you can actually make it work. Now, a lot of people say, hey, who, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have any quarterback, which you look at Ohio State's roster. If you're returning 100% of your skill position guys, that's if nobody decides to transfer. Pretty, pretty much, you're just giving the keys to the Lamborghini to a quarterback and says, just keep the program on the road, don't wreck it, regardless of who actually wins the position. Now, and I will say this, Dave. I think Kyle McCord will have the leg up. He will get the first swing at the bat. I think that his relationship with Marvin Harrison Jr. going all the way back to high school will play a significant role in that because those two, the chemistry between those two, you can't deny it. They've been playing with each other since they were younger. So I do think he's going to get the first crack at the bat. But I like Devin Brown's athleticism, and I think there is a place that you can really utilize his skill set because he's just not an actual runner. He can actually spin the football. So I can see certain packages where you can be creative.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I got a chance to do a one-on-one interview with Devin Brown down at Media Day. It's one of the things I love about like the bowl games, especially college football playoff, is every player on the team is made available at Media Day. It's like mandatory. So we get guys that we never get. So I got a one-on-one interview with Devin Brown. There's something special about him as a young man. Steve did the interview with Kyle McCord, and it was also a very good interview. But I had a chance to sit down with Devin Brown. Something special about him, and I know he's a playmaker. I think it's going to be a really good battle. A good problem to have. And I think Ryan Day's going to, like I said, he's going to keep that battle going as long as he can. All right, let's get into the running back outlook for the Buckeyes in 2023. We know Mayan Williams is coming back now. He made it official yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Not a big surprise. You and I think, knew that was coming, JBook. TreVeyon, hopefully he'll be healthy. Hopefully Evan Pryor will be healthy. Dallin Hayden will now be in his second year. Maybe Chip Trayanum is going to move to running back full time. I tend to think Tony Alford sat down with all of them to make sure they were all coming back. Otherwise, I think they would have tried to find a running back late in the process just for depth. I tend to think all five of those guys are going to be around. And we know depth can disappear real quick, as they found out the hard way this year, JBook. But
Right.
if those guys, we coming into the year, we're like, this position's stacked. And I don't think they're going to have bad luck like that 2 years in a row. These guys are going to be a year older. I'm pretty bullish about the running back room for next year.
I mean, if we want to be honest and take off our rose-colored glasses here, Dave, if you give anybody any true serum around the country, they would say Ohio State probably has the deepest running back room going into the spring. That's if all of the guys stay, especially with Chip being your running back 5, because he has shown against Michigan that he's perfect. He's perfectly capable of being an every down back. But you look at the guys that Dallin Hayden and Evan Pryor. I just think those two bring an element of speed, an element of elusiveness to the game that you necessarily may not see from Henderson and Mayan. Don't get me wrong, two outstanding backs. I think Henderson is a home run hitter. Mayan is your thumper, but every one of those backs brings something different to the table. So I'm excited to see if they can keep all 5 of those guys and losing out on Mark Fletcher, flipping over to Miami. It really doesn't hurt when you have that many guys. I mean, at that point, if you're talking about 6 running backs, you're talking about an absolutely crowded room. But if they can have 5 of them, it makes you really feel great about the depth there because at the end of the year against Georgia, you got Xavier Johnson out there getting carries. That's not ideal. You want a true back out there who's going to be able to be your pounder in, down out. So all five of those guys will definitely give a different type of look when it comes to the running back backfield. And I will say this, Dave, before we move on, Justin Fry, if he's going to be the offensive coordinator, with which a lot of people believe he will be the guy who's calling the plays next year, you're looking at the transition from Kevin Wilson, who was a big stretch guy, zone running scheme, to a Justin Fry type of running scheme, to where it can suit the running backs a whole lot better, to where instead of trying to hit the perimeter on a stretch, you go down to a gap running scheme where they're running downhill, one cut and go, which really is going to help the offensive line in the run blocking, because they can really start firing off the football and start to bully people up front.
All right, next topic. We float around on the Bucknuts Morning Five. There's a lot to talk about. Offensive tackle, they're going to lose both starting offensive tackles. Neither have officially announced yet, but Paris Johnson Jr. is definitely going pro. He basically did in the Players Tribune. Very well-written piece. That kid is A+ young man and an A+ player. I'm happy for him, and I'm happy he comes from a great family. We've had Monica on the show many times, and hopefully we'll get her on again. But so I'm happy for Paris Johnson Jr. What a great young man. DeJuan Jones, I'm being told, will definitely announce that he's turning pro. No surprise there. He walked at senior day. He, last year he even considered going pro, JBook, as you know. So they're going to lose both starting tackles. They do have Josh Fryer coming back at right tackle. Zen Mahalski was the backup at left tackle. I know the staff likes those guys, but they're going after guys in the portal pretty hard. Get into all that. Are you concerned about offensive tackle next year? Do you think they're going to be able to at least find a guy that can compete for a starting job, maybe be a starter in the portal, maybe two guys? Just break all that down for me, my friend.
I mean, can it be a little bit of both? Because I will say this: I do think that they need to go to the portal and find another veteran offensive tackle. Uh, and I think because of the misses from Stud throughout the years has provided little depth when it comes to the offensive tackle position. So I do think that is a concern. You need to get some more experience in there. You need to get more bodies. With that being said, I'm not as concerned as who's going to be the starters if they're going to be able to play at a high level. And the reason I say that is because what I saw from the Ohio State offensive line against Georgia leads me to believe that Justin Fry will have those guys ready to go. I think he's a heck of an offensive line coach. I think whoever he throws out there, he's going to get them coached up playing at a high level. So as far as how they're going to perform, I'm not concerned about that at all, because I think Justin Fry will have those guys humming along. I am concerned about the depth, meaning that if somebody goes down, we get an injury to one of those potential starter tackles, it's very shaky after that as far as the depth. So going into the season, I hope they can land an offensive tackle. They have the Washington State offensive tackle on campus this weekend, who's in the transfer portal. So I'm sure we're going to see several names pop up from now until the next signing day.
A lot of people asking about Luke Whippler. I mean, I think he's fantastic. I don't see him leaving after 3 years, though, as a redshirt sophomore. I mean, even Tyrell Linderbaum, who was the number one center off the board, stayed 4 years at Iowa. And
Yeah.
I tend to think Whippler, I'm not 100%. I'm not hearing this from sources. This is just, an educated guess. I'll be surprised if Whippler leaves as a third-year sophomore. I think he's going to come back to lead this offensive line next year, along with Donovan Jackson. We'll see about Matt Jones, but I think Whippler's coming back to be the quarterback of the O-line next year.
Yeah, I thought Whippler played outstanding, Dave, down the stretch. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything more from him. I know a lot of people take PFF with a grain of salt, but they had him as one of the highest graded centers throughout the entire season of all of college football. And there was nothing on the field from his play that says he wasn't an absolute stud. I thought he did an absolute stellar job against the Georgia interior guys.
Yeah, against the top D tackle in the country, Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter might have been on the banquet circuit a little bit. He was a little gassed out there after about 8 plays. He was running off
Well, it was funny. I mean, we're talking about 3 minutes into the game, and he comes off the field, and the announcer's saying he's gassed. I'm like, we just started the game. They had a month off. What do you mean? What do you mean he's exhausted? The kickoff just happened 20 minutes ago.
Too much Chick-fil-A while he was down there, man. Just eating Chick-fil-A nonstop. No, that was me, actually. Listen, there's if it's free, I'll take 3. We had the chicken biscuits, we had the chicken sandwiches. There was just like nonstop Chick-fil-A down there. I did not hate that at all. All right, let's get into it. This whole thing is hilarious at Michigan. So Jim Harbaugh, who like was trying to turn in Ohio State, I think, for like minor like practice stuff, turns out he was being a naughty boy during COVID. And then he lied to the NCAA, which is the big thing. Like that's like, that's the one that would get him. The thing is, I put this on Twitter. This is not, I said it kind of jokingly, but I'm actually serious. This gives him the perfect out at Michigan. We already know he's flirting with the NFL. And the NFL's flirting with him. It sounds like he's got multiple suitors this time. Panthers, Colts, maybe the Broncos. I don't know why you'd want anything to do with the Broncos. They're going to be a mess for years. They have no picks. You're married to Russell Wilson. You got to play in a tough division. I don't know why anybody would want to mess with the Broncos if you have other options. But here's the thing, JBook. This gives him the perfect out at Michigan. He could say, hey, even if he didn't want to stay, I wanted to stay. I love Michigan. But the NCAA is coming after me for this. Right. When they're letting all these teams buy recruits and they're not doing anything about it, like, forget this, I'm leaving. So this gives him the perfect out. What do you think is going to happen with Harbaugh?
First off, it's hilarious that the that the NCAA, who is basically dead, there's zero enforcement going on throughout the sport. People are tampering. People are getting paid illegally, pay for play when it comes to NIL. Like, there's so much shady stuff going on in college football. And of all the programs, Michigan is the one who gets bullied by the NCAA. It's just ironic. But as far as Jim, hey, Jim did what I said a lot of coaches should have been doing at Ohio State. Deflect, don't cooperate with the NCAA, don't give them anything. And that's kind of what the level 1 violations are. Is Jim pretty much thumbed his nose at the NCAA not participating in the investigation. And I said Ohio.
They said he didn't. Yeah. It wasn't even just that he lied by omission. He just flat out lied, apparently. That's the allegation, at least.
Right. And I said Ohio State should, play the I'm not answering any type of questions. You see that all the time in the South. I mean, you look at Bill Self over at Kansas. They gave him, pretty much a slap on the wrist because he didn't want to participate in their investigation. Same thing down at LSU. But as far as Michigan, I think you're right. I think this probably gives him an out. I find it hilarious that 2 days before this news breaks, he pins a letter talking about how he's potentially coming back and used the bold quote, "Those who stay will be champions." Writes that letter knowing that the NCAA the next day was going to drop the notice of allegations and it was going to go public. So I find that hilarious. I mean, at this point, if Jim actually gets a job offer from the NFL, I will say this not just as an Ohio State fan, someone who helps cover it, but I would probably take that job, Dave. I mean, the work-life balance from the NFL compared to what the colleges have to go through now. You're not having to fly, city to city, small town to small town, recruiting high school kids, and you can just leave. You can just lose them right at the 11th hour because somebody comes in with a bigger NIL bag. Mm-hmm. All of the nonsense dealing with the NCAA, having to kiss the ring of boosters, begging them to donate to your NIL collective just so that you can stay up to date with the Jimmies and the Joes. You look at the Big Ten landscape; it's changing dramatically to where you got USC, UCLA. The travel's going to be extended. I didn't believe that the whole Jim Harbaugh NFL thing had any type of legs because you hear it every year. When you hear their very own John U. Bacon, who is a Michigan lifer, who's written countless books on Michigan and the program, where he actually says, yes, there is something to this in regard to Jim in the NFL. That right there leads me to believe that, yes, this could be somewhat legit.
Yeah, I said the same thing on Wednesday's show, man. When John U. Bacon says it, he's like a little bit of everything. He's a journalist. He's a professor at Michigan. He's a historian. He's a good guy. He's a good man, and he's as clued in as anybody with the Wolverines. All right, last thing. I said we're going to finish with Harbaugh. Let's get this question from Yakov in here. Yakov 22 on YouTube. 2023 Ohio State over-under wins at 10. I'm surprised they said it at 10 and not 10.5 because I feel like 10 I would take the over because I feel like you're going to push at the very least. Notre Dame got a really good quarterback transfer. That makes that game in Sam Hartman from Wake Forest. That makes that game in South Bend a little more interesting, doesn't it, JB? It was already going to be
It does.
interesting. Got to play Michigan at Michigan. We'll see who their coach is. But I'll go over. I feel like, they're going to win 11 games. Maybe even they might even go undefeated. And worst case, I feel like I'm going to push at 10-2.
Yep, I agree. I take the over. As you mentioned, Notre Dame, that's going to be a battle. Year two under Marcus Freeman, that defense was solid at Notre Dame. It was always the question mark in regards to their offense because they never had a quarterback. They still lack skill position power over there at Notre Dame. So I don't think the offense is going to be that much improved, even though they will have a major upgrade at the quarterback position. Michigan, we all know what that's about. Penn State is going to be loaded next year. Drew Aller steps in. They're going to get an upgrade at the quarterback position. You look at all of those young skill position guys that Penn State has, they're going to be probably one of their best teams since Penn State try to make a run for the playoffs. So I think they're going to be stacked. They play Wisconsin coming up. I don't think Wisconsin is going to be there yet. You can't expect Lou Fickle to come in year one and turn that ship around and go in and beat Ohio State. I do think they're going to be competitive. It's going to be a sledgehammer game.
That's going to be weird, man.
Yeah, that's going to be.
It was one thing when he was
Luke.
at Cincinnati. Him
Yeah.
at Wisconsin. I mean, it wouldn't be as weird if he was at, heaven forbid, I don't think he ever would have done it at Michigan. This is going to be extremely weird. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that's going to be a battle. Like I fully expect Ohio State to light them up again. I just think it's going to take Luke several years to really modernize that program because Wisconsin program was behind the times. But one thing that you can count on when it comes to Luke Fickle, he will have them playing hard. He will have them playing discipline, and he will try to take it to Ohio State. So I truly expect that this team, the way that they're stacked right now, they should win 10 games. To me, Dave, I know the defense had a pretty good improvement compared to the Kerry Combs year, but I'm still going into the season with the same question marks when it comes to the secondary that I had this year. You look at the secondary versus the wide receivers; they were like 109th, 110th in the country guarding the wide receiver position. So those question marks in regards to is Ohio State secondary fixed is still looms. If they can right the ship, I do think that they're going to make another run for the playoffs. The front seven, I thought, has some improvement. The linebackers, it's the linebacker play was probably the best linebacker play that we've seen since Jeff Hafley was there. So I just think that if they can get the defense playing together on all three levels, this team, regardless of who's the starting quarterback, regardless of who's going to be the new starting tackles, will make a push to get into the playoffs again next year.
Great stuff as always from JBook. Really appreciate it, my man. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We appreciate you guys very much. If you like the show, like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review, depending on what platform you are watching or listening on. All that stuff really helps. Thanks again to JBook. Thanks to all of you. Hope everyone has a great day and a great weekend.